October in Texas wasn't winter just yet, but it came with the kind of chill that made a man tighten his collar and think about old ghosts. The horizon stretched long and gold, broken only by the rise of Devil's Ridge, its jagged edge biting into a pale morning sky. Jack Rawlins stood on the creaking front porch of his ranch house, steaming coffee in hand, watching the wind carry whispers through the tall prairie grass. 6 months. That's how long it had been since he'd declared his land neutral ground. 6 months of trading smiles instead of bullets, of shared water rights and cautious handshakes between white settlers and the Comanche. 6 months of fragile peace stitched together by a cowboy who just wanted to be left the hell alone. But peace, out here, was a thin blanket in a cold world, and this morning, something about the way the wind moved sharp, irregular, told Jack that winter wasn't the only thing rolling in. "You still dream about this place?" came a voice behind him, dry and gravelly. Jack turned. Seth Grady. The old mercenary had the same beat-up hat, the same scar down his left cheek, and the same look in his eyes like he'd seen too much and didn't like any of it. A battered Winchester hung from his back like it belonged there. He looked like trouble that had learned to walk on 2 feet. "Hard to forget the ridge," Jack muttered, nodding toward the rise in the distance. "Still see it in my sleep some nights." Seth stepped onto the porch, boots heavy on the boards, passed by the creek yesterday, found something that didn't sit right. Hoof prints, 4 or 5 horses, light riders, spaced apart, like scouts. That close to the ranch, Seth nodded, closer than they should be. And Jack, those horses. Their shoes were wrapped, burlap and rawhide. Jack's jaw tightened. Wrapped hooves meant one thing: somebody didn't want to be followed. "That ain't normal," Jack said, setting his coffee down. "Nope," Seth replied. "And that's not all. Cows have gone missing. Not just yours. Ramirez down the hill says he's short 3 head. No trails, no blood, just gone." Jack rubbed his temple. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the creak of the porch swing swaying in the wind. "You feel it, don't you?" Seth asked. "That kind of silence that hums under your ribs, I feel it," Jack said, like the air's holding its breath. The 2 men stared out toward the hills. Devil's Ridge loomed like a bad memory, its stone face cracked and ancient. Somewhere past that ridge was the border between what men called law and what the land remembered. Jack broke the silence. "I rode out to the south fence line 3 days back. Found a deer carcass half eaten. But here's the thing. No tracks, no blood trail, just the body, like it had been dropped from the damn sky." Seth gave a low whistle. "You think it's them? I think someone or something is stirring the pot." Seth spat into the dust. "Winter's coming early this year." They stood like that for a long while, 2 old soldiers without a war but carrying the weight of 100. The air seemed to grow colder, like it knew secrets neither of them did. Then came the hawk. A shadow passed over them, a red-tailed hawk circling low, too low. It let out a shrill cry, unnatural, urgent. Jack's hand instinctively went to the Colt on his hip. The bird circled once, twice, then screamed again before darting off toward the canyon. Seth watched it go. Old tribes say hawks are messengers. That one's screaming like it saw death riding. Jack nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time I saddled up." Seth clapped him on the back. "I'll check the western ridge. You keep your eyes on the road from the canyon. Trouble's coming. Jack, you can smell it." as Seth rode off, disappearing into the dust and sagebrush. Jack lingered on the porch. The wind had shifted. The grass no longer whispered, it hissed. And in that sound, Jack Rawlins heard the first warning drumbeats of something dark approaching. He didn't know what yet, but he knew this much. The storm wasn't just in the sky, it was already riding. The sound hit Jack Rawlins like a slap of cold water, 3 sharp cracks echoing from the north, from Devil's Canyon, gunfire, and not the kind for hunting. He set his axe down instantly, heart hammering. He waited, then 2 more shots. Silence, a rhythm Jack had heard before gunfire, and 3s and 2s meant retreat or execution. Seconds later, the faint but distinct thunder of hooves reached his ears. Fast, frantic. A gallop pushed to the breaking point. Jack grabbed his rifle, stepping off the porch into the pale autumn sunlight. His eyes narrowed against the haze. From the direction of the canyon, a lone rider burst into view, the horse a paint, lathered in sweat, legs trembling, stumbled but kept running. The rider sagged low, one arm around the horse's neck, the other clutching his side. Jack's stomach dropped. Riverhawk. He hadn't seen the boy in months, not since summer, when the young Comanche had ridden in with a peaceful party to trade for tools and learn how to break colts. Jack remembered the fire in his eyes, the questions he asked about wheat, windmills, and the difference between mule shoes and saddle stirrups. Just a kid then, maybe 19 now, but the warrior spirit in him had always been older. Now, that same boy was barely holding on. The horse collapsed just shy of the fence line, legs buckling, chest heaving like a blacksmith's bellows. Riverhawk spilled to the ground, hitting hard. Dust billowed. Jack ran, vaulting the fence. "River," he called, kneeling beside him. The boy's eyes fluttered, unfocused, lips cracked. Blood had soaked through his deer-hide shirt, spreading in deep crimson patches. One wound in the shoulder, another in the thigh. Bad. Jack reached for him, but Riverhawk's hand shot to the knife at his belt. Trembling but ready, his mouth opened, muttering fast in Comanche, too fast for Jack to understand. But the fear in his voice needed no translation. "Easy, son," Jack said, hands raised. "It's me, Jack. You remember?" The boy blinked. A flicker of recognition cut through the haze. "Jack. Rawlins. That's right. You're safe now." No safe." His hand clutched Jack's shirt. "Tight. Soldiers. Close. They kill me. If you help, Father must kill you." Jack froze. "What did you say, sacred law?" Riverhawk gasped. "White man who aid Comanche in escape must be hunted, even by kin." The blood on the boy's lips ran thick now. He was slipping. "Damn the law," Jack muttered, and scooped him up like he weighed nothing. The boy groaned but didn't resist. Jack carried him across the yard, boots thudding against dry earth, Riverhawk's blood seeping into his shirt. Inside. He kicked open the cabin door, rushed him to the back room, laid him on the bed, bandages, hot water, whiskey, whatever he had. He worked fast. The bullet was still in the shoulder, clean through the thigh. Riverhawk passed out. As Jack pulled the soaked shirt away, he saw it 3 notches carved into the skin of the boy's chest. Old marks, tribal, but something else beneath them. A pattern of scar tissue Jack had only heard of in stories, symbols burned with ash and bone by the elders for protection. The flame of the forest. The Comanche called it a spiritual ward or a curse. No one really knew, and Jack didn't have time to wonder, because outside, he heard it, the thunder of hooves again. Closer this time, too close. He looked out the window. Dust on the ridge, 10 riders, blue coats, sabers. Jack's breath hitched. God damn it. He turned back to Riverhawk, still unconscious, breath shallow. You picked one hell of a day to come back. Kid, he said quietly, but in that moment, the memories came flooding in. A younger Riverhawk, no older than 15, riding in with his father, Dark Elk, to trade for barbed wire and horseshoes. The boy had asked if he could stay behind for a few days, learn the ways of white man farming, as he called it. Jack had taken him in, showed him how to patch fence lines, how to calm a spooked stallion, how to tell fresh tracks from old. They'd even named a colt together Smoketail. The boy had laughed at how slow the horse was, called it lazy spirit and fast legs for 3 days. They'd shared bread and stories. Then Dark Elk came back. His eyes didn't smile. He took Jack aside and spoke words Jack had never forgotten. If one day my son comes here wounded, hunted, and you help him, Dark Elk had said in broken English, then I, his father, must come for your life. That is the law. You understand? Jack had nodded. I understand. Now, here they were, and Jack had just broken that law. But as he looked down at the boy lying in his bed, pale, bleeding, still breathing, Jack knew he'd do it again, because some laws, no matter how sacred, had to bend when blood was on the line. Outside, hooves slowed. They were here. The war wasn't coming. It had already arrived. The first man over the ridge rode tall in the saddle, a blue uniform catching the sun like polished steel. Behind him, 9 others followed, forming a loose wedge as they descended the slope toward Jack Rawlins' ranch. Their sabers bounced at their hips, rifles slung, eyes sharp. Jack stood in the doorway of his cabin, hands loose at his sides, every sense taut as stretched wire. Inside, Riverhawk lay still in the bedroom, half conscious and barely clinging to life. The lead rider stopped 10 feet from the porch. His horse snorted once, ears pinned back. The man swung down, slow and deliberate. Afternoon, he said, though there was nothing polite about his tone. Name's Lieutenant Clayton Reed, United States Cavalry. Jack nodded once. Rawlins, what brings you out here? Lieutenant Reed stepped closer, his eyes scanning Jack's face like a butcher inspecting meat. He was lean, cold-eyed, with the kind of jaw that always seemed clenched. A small scar sat beneath his right ear, just enough to give the impression of violence. We're pursuing a Comanche warrior, Reed said, voice clipped. He murdered 2 soldiers this morning, stole medical supplies bound for the reservation. Witnesses saw him riding this way. Jack's pulse thudded. Can't say I've seen anything unusual. Reed tilted his head. Funny, we followed hoof tracks right to your fence line. You wouldn't be harboring anyone. Would you? Jack shrugged. Like I said, haven't seen a thing. Reed's eyes narrowed. Mind if we take a look around? Just to be thorough, Jack hesitated for half a breath, just enough for Reed to notice. This ranch is neutral ground, Jack said. By agreement with Chief Red Moon. My orders come from Colonel Maddox. Reed snapped, and he don't give a damn about tribal agreements. Behind him, the soldiers began dismounting. One of them, a younger man with a sour expression, was already heading toward the barn. Jack's blood ran colder than the October wind. He had minutes, maybe less. You know, "Lieutenant," he said slowly, stepping down from the porch, "you walk onto this land without cause. You risk starting a fire you can't put out." Reed sneered. "I'm here for justice." Jack took a breath. "Then let's talk about justice. You said the Comanche killed 2 of your men. What were they doing escorting a wagon?" Reed replied, "Medicine, food, blanket supplies for Comanche children. He killed them in cold blood and took the lot." Jack squinted. "That doesn't sound like the Comanche I know." Reed's tone turned hard. "What the hell do you know enough," Jack said, "to know they don't take trophies or kill supply escorts meant for their own?" Reed's eyes flicked sideways. "They took this." He nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward, holding a blood-stained leather pouch. It was small, handmade, decorated with intricate beadwork greens and whites. A little red, but the pattern was off. Jack's stomach churned. This belonged to one of the dead. Reed said, had his personal letters inside, a photo of his wife. The Comanche bastard took it as a trophy. Jack reached out. "Mind if I look?" Reed hesitated, then gave a small nod. The pouch was rough, but detailed. Jack had spent enough time among the Comanche to know their tribal markings. This one wasn't from Red Moon's people. The beads were square cut, not rounded. The pattern didn't match any he'd ever seen. "This ain't theirs," Jack said softly. "It's a fake." Reed's face darkened. "You calling me a liar? I'm saying your story don't add up." Before Reed could respond, a shout came from the barn. "Lieutenant found something." One of the soldiers emerged, holding a blood-soaked shirt, Riverhawk's. The soldier's face was tight, still wet. "Sir, blood's fresh. Looks like someone's been treating wounds." Reed turned to Jack with a smile that chilled the air. "Well now," he said, "looks like your neutrality's a damn lie." The circle tightened. Rifles lowered, not quite aimed, but close enough. Jack raised his hand slightly. "That blood's mine. Caught my hand splitting wood this morning." Reed stepped closer, eyes locked on Jack's hands. "Fresh blood is bright red. This shirt's red, not brown, so don't piss on me and tell me it's raining." Tension wrapped around Jack's lungs like wire. Inside, Riverhawk was defenseless. One wrong move, and the soldiers would find him. Jack needed time, so he played the only card he had. "You seem awfully interested in ending this quick, Lieutenant," he said. "What's the hurry?" "Scared of what we might find if we dig deeper." Reed bristled. "I came for justice." Jack leaned in. "You came to bury something." Reed's nostrils flared. "Search the house," he snapped, "top to bottom. Tear up the floors if you have to." The soldiers moved toward the cabin. Jack stepped into Reed's path. "This ain't over, Lieutenant, and when the truth comes out, you'll wish you'd turned around when you had the chance." Reed leaned in, breath hot. "If I find that savage in your house, Rawlins, I'll string him up from your porch, and I'll see you court-martialed as a traitor." Jack didn't blink. "You'll have to go through me first." The men locked eyes. The wind howled across the prairie. And for a moment, the only sound was the slow, steady drumbeat of approaching hooves, coming from the hills. The cabin door slammed open. Boots stomped in 2, then 3, then the rest. Rifles low, eyes scanning every corner like they expected bullets to come flying out of the walls. Jack stood frozen near the hearth, his palms itching for the pistol on his hip. But he didn't move. He couldn't, Not yet. Lieutenant Reed followed his men in, calm as a snake with full fangs. He moved like the room already belonged to him. "Bedrooms this way," barked one of the soldiers. Jack's heart spiked. They were close, too damn close. In the back room, Riverhawk lay motionless beneath heavy wool blankets, breathing shallow, a streak of red trailing from his shoulder onto Jack's sheets. He looked more dead than alive. But if the soldiers pulled back those covers, the war would begin then and there. Reed's voice sliced through the cabin like a bayonet. "Mr. Rawlins," he said, with mock courtesy. "Would you care to explain the fresh trail of blood leading through your front door?" Jack exhaled slow. "Told you. I cut my hand." Reed didn't even look. "Right hand," Jack nodded. Reed gestured. A soldier yanked Jack's right hand up, no wound, no bandage, just rough cowboy skin and a faint scar from 2 summers ago. Reed's smile turned cruel. "Funny. I don't see any blood." Jack's voice hardened. "You don't see much of anything, do you?" Lieutenant Reed's patience snapped. "Enough of this." He barked. "You're harboring a fugitive, a killer, under military law. I can have you shot right here. No trial, no last words. Just a hole in the dirt and a name nobody remembers." One of the soldiers, young, blond, sweating, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," he muttered, "shouldn't we shut up, Corporal?" Reed hissed. "You see justice. I see a liar protecting a savage." He turned back to Jack. "Where is he?" Jack met his gaze. "You think I'm afraid to die? You should be." Reed stepped in, face inches away. "I don't bluff. Cowboy." Just then, from the back room, came a weak sound, a cough, muffled but clear. Reed's eyes flicked toward the hallway. "He's here." Jack's mind raced. He had seconds, maybe less. Think. Damn it. Then another sound, a whisper, hoarse, deliberate. Jack, Riverhawk's voice. God help him. Reed moved toward the hallway, hand on his revolver. Jack stepped between him and the doorway. "I wouldn't," he said, voice low. Reed raised his sidearm. "I swear to God, Rawlins." But before the lieutenant could finish, the soldier nearest the door let out a startled yell. "Sir, you better see this." Reed shoved past Jack, storming into the bedroom. Riverhawk lay in the bed, eyes barely open, sweat on his brow, one arm stretched across his chest. His fingers were stained red, but the blood, it glowed, a faint shimmer, unnatural. Reed recoiled. "What in hell?" Jack stepped in behind him. "You ever seen blood do that?" Lieutenant Reed said nothing. Riverhawk's voice came soft. "Don't touch me," Reed barked. "What sorcery is this?" Jack answered. "Not sorcery. Protection." Reed turned to him, furious. "What are you saying?" Jack nodded toward Riverhawk. "Ask him yourself." The boy licked his lips. "Wound, touched by fire. Ancestor flame," one of the soldiers whispered. "The flame of the forest." Riverhawk's voice, weak but certain, continued. "It marks, sacred blood, guardian of old forest. No man can spill it without curse." Reed scoffed. "Fairy tales." But a second soldier took a step back. "Sir, that mark on his chest, it's real. I've seen it once, back at Fort Meade. The scout who shot one of them, he went mad, eyes turned white, slit his own throat 3 days later." "Shut up," Reed barked. "I will not have ghost stories control this room," but the fear had taken root. You could see it in the way the rifles lowered just a little, in the way one man touched the cross at his neck. Riverhawk coughed again, the sound rattling. If you kill me here, land will burn. Winds will carry ash to your children's mouths. Jack seized the moment. You hear that? Reed. Even your men don't want this. Reed looked around. They weren't standing behind him like before. They were watching him, measuring him. Jack pressed on. This ain't just war. Lieutenant, it's prophecy. Reed turned back to Riverhawk, gun still in hand. You're bluffing. You're bleeding out. You ain't no spirit. Riverhawk smiled faintly. Then shoot. See who dies first. Reed's finger tensed on the trigger, and that's when the drums began. Faint, but rising. From the hills. Boom, boom, boom. Reed's eyes widened. Outside, soldiers called out, scattering. Riders, East Ridge movement in the trees. Chaos erupted, but Jack never looked away from the boy in the bed. Riverhawk's hand reached up, weak but steady. He gripped Jack's arm. You broke law to save me. I know, Jack said quietly. You will pay for that. Jack nodded. I figured, but not today. Riverhawk whispered and slipped back into unconsciousness. Behind them, the war had already begun. The sound was unmistakable. Drums, slow, heavy, primal. They echoed from the east first, then the north, then, chillingly, from the south. Boom, boom, boom. Each beat seemed to rattle the bones in Jack Rawlins's chest. It didn't sound like any signal he'd heard from scouts or raiders. It was older, deeper, like the heartbeat of the land itself was waking up. Jack stepped outside the cabin just in time to see every cavalryman freeze in place, rifles half raised, eyes wide. Even Lieutenant Reed stood still, as if the weight of those drums pressed down on him more than orders or threats ever could. Is that what I think it is? One soldier asked, voice cracking. War drums, muttered Sergeant Eli Harper, stepping out of the barn, rifle clenched tight. Reed's jaw tightened. They're bluffing. But Jack had grown up among stories whispered around Comanche campfires, tales passed from toothless elders with smoke in their eyes and fear in their hearts. These weren't just war drums. They were summons. He spoke softly, mostly to himself. The keeper is calling. Reed turned sharply. What did you say? Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the hills. He remembered what Chief Red Moon had told him once. Long ago, when the first treaties were drawn, if the white men ever carved too deep into the hills, if they cut the sacred trees and spill the ash into the wind, the keeper of the forest will wake, and when he calls, all three nations will rise together. The drums will beat in three tongues, and the land will turn red. Jack looked down. There, on the edge of his corral, were three distinct marks in the dirt. He hadn't noticed them earlier, hidden beneath wind-blown hay and dry leaves, but now, with the sun shifting just so, he could see them clearly. Scorch marks, not black, not gray, but a dark, unnatural red, like the earth itself had bled fire. He knelt and ran his fingers along one of the marks. The soil was hot, not warm, hot, as if something had burned there recently, yet left no smoke, no ash, just heat, like something unholy had stepped across his land. Harper saw it too. What the hell is that? Jack stood slowly. Liar's fire. He whispered. Reed rolled his eyes. Enough of this goddamn folklore. But Jack wasn't talking to him anymore. He was looking east, toward the ridgeline, where the dust clouds began to rise, Figures emerged, mounted warriors, feathers catching the wind, faces streaked in paint. Then another group from the north, moving in coordinated formation, and from the south, still silhouettes, but many, surrounding us. Harper muttered. "They're not charging, they're positioning, they're waiting," Jack said. For what Reed snapped, Jack's answer chilled every man in earshot. For judgment, the drums kept beating, not fast, not urgent, just steady, the way a judge might tap his fingers before pronouncing a sentence. Reed barked orders: form a perimeter, prepare for retreat. But the soldiers were hesitant. Half of them stared toward the woods, gripping their rifles like charms, as if the barrels might protect them from ghosts. Harper moved to Jack's side. "You ever seen this before?" Jack shook his head. "Not in this life." Inside the cabin, Riverhawk stirred. He sat upright slowly, bandaged chest rising and falling with labored breath. His voice, when it came, was low and grave. "They've answered." Jack turned to him. Who? Riverhawk looked out the window. The three blood tribes, Red Moon, Silent Bear, and Shadow Elk. They march under the keeper's call. Jack's voice dropped. "Is that what this is?" A curse, Riverhawk met his gaze. Not a curse, a reckoning. He pointed to the burn marks. They cut the trees, the ones that marked the line between worlds, the trees carved with the old songs. You know what that means. Jack did. It meant the barrier between the sacred and the damned was broken, and now justice was no longer man's to give. Reed stepped into the cabin. "I want that boy bound and brought outside. Now." "No," Jack said sharply. Reed's hand moved to his sidearm. "He's coming with us." Jack didn't flinch. "You drag him out there. They'll burn this ranch to the ground before you reach the horses." Reed sneered. "Let them try." But outside, the drums suddenly stopped. Silence, pure, terrible. It rang louder than any noise before it. Then, from the eastern hills, a single horn blew, long and low, not military, not native, something else, something old. The soldiers froze again. Reed whispered. "What the hell is that?" Riverhawk replied. "The horn of the keeper. He calls only once, for the guilty." Jack stepped toward Reed, voice low and dangerous. "You brought this, with your lies, with your greed. Now we all pay for it." From the ridge, warriors began to move, slow at first, then faster, but not charging. No, they were encircling. The trap was closing. Reed turned pale. "Hold your ground," he shouted. But his men didn't move. They couldn't, because what approached wasn't just warriors, it was something else. At the front of each group walked a man in robes of black, face hidden in soot, bearing staffs adorned with eagle feathers and bone. The keepers, the spiritual judges of the tribes, and when they came, it meant the land had spoken, and blood was due. The line had been drawn. Jack could feel it in the dust, in the air, in the eyes of every man standing between the rifles of the cavalry and the silent war drums of the tribes. But the next crack didn't come from a gunshot. It came from within. "Lieutenant Reed." Sergeant Eli Harper stepped forward, voice strained, fingers twitching near his rifle strap. Reed turned. "Sharp. What is it?" Sergeant Harper looked around, swallowing hard. The rest of the soldiers watched him like men at a hanging, unsure if they were looking at the hangman or the rope. "I can't follow your orders any more." Reed's face twisted. "What did you just say?" Harper squared his shoulders. I said, no more lies, no more cover-ups, not here. Reed reached for his sidearm. You're speaking treason. Harper's rifle rose like a whisper, not pointed, not aimed, but there between them. Jack stepped closer, eyes locked on the sergeant. Harper's voice cracked, but the words landed heavy. I've been watching you for 6 months, following your orders. Guarding those wagons with no registry, escorting men who didn't carry army papers, looking the other way while trees were cut, rivers poisoned, land marked with flags we were told never to question. And now you want us to die to protect a lie? Reed's face drained wide. You don't know what you're saying. Oh, I do, Harper said. I know that this boy. He nodded toward Riverhawk got shot for trying to stop you from carving through ground his people held sacred for generations. Jack turned to Riverhawk, who stood now, swaying, one hand gripping the doorframe. His eyes burned. There's a tree, Riverhawk said, voice hoarse, just beyond the northern rise, a white cedar, old as time. It was marked with the sign of the Eagle Father. No Comanche would dare touch it. It held stories, spirits. Jack's breath caught. He remembered the tree. I rode past it last spring. He said it had carvings, deep grooves, circles, thunder marks. Riverhawk nodded. It's gone. Harper spoke again, quieter now, like confession. Reed gave the order, brought in surveyors with axes and promises, said the land held gold veins, said they needed to see if the legends were true before the government pushed forward on the relocation incentives. Reed exploded. You idiot! Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've told the truth, Harper said. Reed's hand moved fast, but Harper was faster. The sergeant's rifle rose, this time firm, aimed. Don't, Harper said. Reed froze. Jack stepped between them, eyes wide. Gold. That's what this is about. You sold out the piece for a pile of rock. Reed didn't answer, but he didn't have to. Jack's fist clenched. You let them cut that tree, Reed snarled. It was just wood. Riverhawk's voice turned cold. It was the voice of our ancestors. A gust of wind tore through the clearing, sudden and biting, kicking up dust and feathers. The silence after was thick. Jack turned to Harper. Who else knows? Harper looked at the ground. Everyone back in town. Father Delmar blessed the survey crew before they rode out. Mayor Kinsey took a bribe to turn over the mineral maps. Even old man Jasper, the storekeeper, he kept the registry logs quiet. Reed laughed, bitter and broken. You really think you can stop this now? We're just the hand. The arm reaches all the way to Austin. You think they'll let you walk into the Capitol and shout conspiracy without ending up in a ditch? Jack stared him down. I don't care what happens to me, but you're going to answer for this. Reed's eyes darted toward the hills toward the war drums, now silent, now waiting. Jack looked to Riverhawk. That tree, it was real. Wasn't it a guardian? Riverhawk nodded. The keeper lives there, or lived. His roots were the last seal, the fire you saw in the soil. That was his death cry. Jack's knees felt weak. You think this was about territory, Riverhawk said. But you woke something older, hungrier. Now it waits. It listens. Behind them. The sky had changed. Clouds had gathered. Not storm clouds, not thunderheads. Smoke from the ground. Riverhawk looked toward the horizon. If judgment comes now, it won't be with guns. It will be with fire. Harper turned to Jack. What do we do? Jack looked at the faces of the men around him. Young, scared, lied to. He looked at Riverhawk, standing tall despite the blood, despite the wound, and then, finally, at Reed. "We tell the truth," Jack said, loud, to every ear that'll hear it. Riverhawk nodded slowly. "Then you walk the edge of the blade." "So be it," Jack replied, because anything less than the truth would be another cut in the heart of the land. The night fell without stars, just darkness, thick, unmoving. Then came the sound hooves, dozens. No drums this time, no horn, just raw thunder rolling across the plains. From the north, torches flickered into view. At their center rode a figure carved from legend broad shoulders. War paint striped like claw marks, eyes like burning coals. Running Wolf. Behind him, 89 mounted warriors followed in silence, their faces painted, their weapons ready. Some carried spears, others tomahawks. A few even bore antique rifles wrapped in red cloth. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, a half circle of quiet judgment. Jack stood still, every muscle bracing. This wasn't a war party. This was a tribunal. Running Wolf dismounted in one fluid motion, the silence around him bent like gravity. He walked forward slowly, tomahawk at his side, eyes locked on Jack, then Riverhawk, then finally on Reed. "My son," he said, voice low but loud enough to carry. "Is he safe?" Riverhawk stepped out from the cabin, leaning against the doorframe, blood on his bandages but his stance proud. "I live, Father," he said in Comanche. Running Wolf's face twitched just slightly. Relief, fury, maybe even shame, flickered across his features. Then his voice turned cold. "You helped him," he said to Jack. Knowing what that meant, Jack nodded once. "I did." Running Wolf stared at him. "Then you have chosen a side," before Jack could answer. A gunshot rang out. Cracked dust kicked up inches from Riverhawk's feet. Reed had drawn, was aiming again. The next shot would not miss, but before he could pull the trigger, Harper tackled him, sending both men crashing to the ground. Chaos exploded, weapons raised, but no one fired, because when they rose, Harper had pinned Reed's own pistol in Harper's hand. "Stand down," Harper barked at the cavalry. No one moved. Then, slowly, Harper turned to Running Wolf. "Lieutenant Reed tried to murder your son in cold blood. Again." Running Wolf's voice turned stone. "Then, by Comanche law, he must face judgment." Reed spat blood. "You have no law, just savagery." Jack stepped forward. "Wait. If we're choosing law over war, let the man fight, one-on-one." Running Wolf raised an eyebrow. "Trial by combat," he asked. Jack nodded. "Your way, his fate in his own hands." Running Wolf turned to Riverhawk. The boy nodded. "It is fair." Reed laughed, hollow. "You want me to fight some red-painted devil in the dirt?" "No," Running Wolf said, and turned to the crowd. From among the warriors, a figure stepped forward. He was younger, maybe 25, slender but sinewy, no war paint, just scars long, brutal ones running across his chest. His eyes were empty. "My nephew," Running Wolf said. "He lost his brother to your men. He will speak with his hands." Reed looked pale now, but he stood, shrugged Harper's hand off, drew his knife. "I've killed better than him." The crowd formed a wide circle. The moon finally broke through the clouds, casting cold light across the clearing. The two men stepped into the ring. One, a soldier built on pride and cruelty. The other, a warrior forged in grief. The duel began. At first, they circled, Then Reed lunged wild, fast. The Comanche sidestepped, letting the blade whistle past. Then came a backhand across Reed's face, followed by a knee to the gut. Reed staggered, growled, charged again. This time he slashed, caught the warrior's arm. Blood spilled, but the warrior didn't flinch. He stepped in, too close for Reed to swing, and then, in a blur, disarmed him with a twist and drove his knee into Reed's chest, sending him sprawling. Reed gasped, flat on his back, the knife now at his throat, but the blade did not fall. The warrior looked to Running Wolf, waiting. Running Wolf gave the nod. But before the blade descended, Harper shouted, "Wait!" All eyes turned. He stepped into the circle. Slowly. "We can't kill him." Running Wolf's eyes narrowed. Why? Because he needs to face a real trial, in the fort, with witnesses, with evidence. If we kill him here, he becomes a martyr. But if we expose him fully, publicly, he becomes a disgrace, one that others in power will be forced to answer for. Reed wheezed. "You'd protect me." Harper knelt beside him. "No, I'll walk you into court myself. And when they hang you, it'll be by your own laws." The Comanche warrior looked at Running Wolf again. Running Wolf hesitated, then nodded. Let him live. For now. Jack exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The duel was over, but the war was not, because what came next would be even more dangerous. Truth. The Capitol building in Austin was 1,000 miles from the blood-soaked dirt of Jack Rawlins' ranch. But as Jack stood in the witness box, leather pouch clutched in his calloused hands, it felt closer than ever. Inside the pouch were not just surveyor's markers and government-engraved brass tags, they were teeth, fangs of a buried truth, each one stamped with coordinates, codes, initials, evidence of stolen ground and desecrated oaths. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the walls, pencils scratching furiously. Generals sat stiff as statues. Politicians whispered behind gloved hands. But when Jack spoke, there was no noise, just the slow, steady rhythm of a cowboy speaking truth to power. "I ain't here for revenge," he began. Voice low. "I'm here 'cause some men came to my land to kill a boy for protecting his father's grave, and I reckon if we call that justice, then we've got no damn idea what that word means anymore." He laid out every detail, the ambush, the faked pouch, the survey maps hidden under false manifests, the ancient tree cut down for a vein of gold that might not even exist. When he finished, he opened the pouch and spilled its contents across the table. Silence. Then a stir. The judge leaned forward. "Do you know what these markers represent?" Mr. Rawlins' Jack met his eyes. "I know they were hammered into land the government swore would never be touched. I know they led to lies, blood, and almost a war. I know they mean everything to people who were told they'd already lost everything." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "We'll need a federal review, immediately." Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Jack didn't say a word. He climbed back on his horse and rode out of town with Riverhawk beside him. That was 3 months ago. And now, as winter settled over the plains, the headlines told a new story. 17 officials indicted in land conspiracy, gold rush fraud foiled by civilian witness, Comanche-Spanish treaties revalidated by federal court. Justice had come, not in a blaze of gunfire, but in paper, testimony, and ink, and Riverhawk. He became a bridge. He traveled between towns and tribes, serving as a translator, a witness, and sometimes even a peace broker. Settlers who once feared him now shook his hand. Comanche elders who once distrusted the white man now nodded quietly when Jack's name was spoken. Jack. Though, he went home, back to the ranch, back to the quiet, back to the wind that never lied. He rebuilt the corral, repaired the bedroom door still dented from a soldier's boot. He didn't expect visits, didn't ask for praise, but every year, on the first frost of October, a single feather would appear on his porch, long, white-tipped, eagle, no note, no rider, just the sign. Jack would smile, because he knew some debts weren't paid in silver or blood, they were paid in respect. One morning, Riverhawk returned, dressed half in buckskin, half in cotton shirt. The mix suited him. In his hand was a carved staff Red Moon's own passed to him in ceremony. You were right, he told Jack, about what that peace takes more guts than war. Jack chuckled. You sure about that? 'Cause war still sounds a lot quicker. Riverhawk smiled. But it never finishes the job. They stood in silence a while, watching the sun rise over the hills. Still neutral ground here, Riverhawk asked. Jack nodded. Always. And then, soft but clear, Riverhawk said, You're not just neutral anymore. Jack, you're a bridge. Jack didn't reply, didn't need to. He just stared out across the prairie, wind in his beard, heart finally steady. The land had spoken, and for the first time in a long time, it was at peace. If that story stirred something deep in your chest, like it did in the hearts of the ones who stood between truth and blood, then don't ride off just yet. On my channel, I bring you true Western tales forged in dust, fire, and impossible choices. Stories of men and women who stood tall when the world wanted them on their knees. So if you believe the past still speaks, if the drums of justice gave you chills, if you felt pride when honor stood its ground, hit that subscribe button. Join me for the next ride, where legends walk and the wind still carries secrets. And trust me, the next story waiting for you, it's even wilder than this one.